The day I uncovered a forgotten bank account with $77 million in my late husband's name, I realized the man I had loved for more than 3 decades had carried a secret so enormous that it shattered everything I believed about our marriage. I thought losing him was the greatest pain I would ever face. But I soon learned that grief was only the beginning because the truth waiting inside those old papers would pull me into a mystery filled with betrayal, hidden fortunes, and dangerous lies. My name is Rebecca Collins, and I was 64 years old when my husband, Ethan Collins, passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack in our small home outside Nashville, Tennessee. We had shared 34 years of marriage built on simple routines, quiet evenings, and constant financial struggles, and although we never had much money, I believed our love was enough to carry us through every hardship life placed in our path. Ethan owned a neighborhood hardware store that barely earned enough to keep the lights on, while I spent nearly 3 decades working as a registered nurse. Before retiring because of chronic back pain that made long shifts impossible, we counted every dollar, delayed fixing our leaking roof, drove the same aging pickup truck for almost 20 years, and watched our credit card balances grow. Whenever an unexpected medical bill or home repair appeared without warning, even with all those hardships, I never questioned our situation because Ethan always assured me that better days would eventually come if we remained patient and stayed together through every challenge. Looking back now, I remember countless moments when he quietly stared out the kitchen window with a distant expression, as though he carried a burden too heavy to share. But I simply believed he was worried about our bills like I was. About 6 weeks after the funeral, I finally gathered enough strength to sort through the boxes stored in our dusty attic because I knew I could no longer avoid dealing with the paperwork Ethan had left behind. Hidden beneath a loose wooden floorboard was an old leather envelope containing foreign banking documents dated 1990, and when my eyes landed on the handwritten balance showing $77 million, every breath seemed to disappear, as my entire world changed in a single unforgettable moment. I carried the envelope downstairs and spread every document across the dining room table, carefully comparing the account number, official bank seals, and handwritten notes because I desperately wanted to prove to myself that the papers were fake. Instead, every page looked authentic, and the more I examined them, the more impossible it became to believe that my husband had somehow hidden a fortune while we spent decades worrying about overdue bills and surviving from one paycheck to the next. Sleep never came that night because my mind kept replaying every difficult year of our marriage, from the holidays when we exchanged inexpensive gifts to the birthdays we celebrated with homemade cakes because restaurant dinners felt like an impossible luxury. I remembered selling my grandmother's jewelry to pay for a medical procedure, watching Ethan apologize with tears in his eyes because he believed he had failed me. And suddenly every painful memory carried a question that refused to leave my thoughts. Early the next morning, I gathered my courage and called the international bank using the phone number printed on one of the documents, expecting a polite employee to explain that the account had long ago been closed or that the paperwork belonged to someone else with a similar name. After verifying several details, the banker quietly confirmed that the account was still active, had been maintained for decades without interruption, and remained one of the oldest private accounts managed by their institution. My hands trembled so badly that I nearly dropped the phone as I explained that Ethan had recently passed away and that I was his surviving wife calling to begin the process of transferring the account into his estate. The banker remained silent for several uncomfortable seconds before speaking in a careful voice, explaining that the funds could not be released because a legally registered beneficiary had already contacted the bank shortly after my husband's death. For a moment, I could not speak because nothing in my life had prepared me to hear those words, and the silence on the phone felt heavier than anything I had experienced since Ethan's funeral. When I begged the banker to tell me who had claimed the fortune, he apologized respectfully and explained that privacy laws prevented him from revealing the beneficiary's identity, leaving me with nothing except unanswered questions and a growing feeling that someone very close to my family had been hiding the truth for many years. I knew I could not solve a mystery that stretched back more than 3 decades by myself, so I searched for an attorney with experience handling international banking disputes and complicated inheritance cases. After several phone calls, I met a calm and highly respected lawyer named Victoria Hayes, who listened carefully, without interrupting, and immediately agreed that the circumstances surrounding the account raised far more questions than answers. Victoria began requesting financial records, property documents, tax filings, and every legal paper connected to Ethan's estate, while also contacting the overseas bank through official legal channels instead of ordinary customer service. As the evidence slowly arrived over the following weeks, we discovered that Ethan had never transferred even a single dollar from the mysterious account into any of our personal bank accounts, making our years of financial hardship seem even more confusing than before. The biggest surprise came from a forensic accountant named Daniel Pierce, who carefully examined decades of financial transactions and noticed a pattern that nobody else had seen. Although the main balance remained almost untouched, small amounts had quietly been transferred every few months into several investment companies located inside the United States, and every transfer followed the same careful schedule. For nearly 20 years, Victoria immediately investigated the companies receiving those transfers, expecting to find ordinary investment firms, but instead uncovered a chain of businesses connected through complicated ownership, records, and hidden partnerships. At the center of every company appeared one familiar name that made my heart sink because it belonged to my husband's oldest friend, Richard Lawson, the man who had comforted me during the funeral and repeatedly promised that he would always help me. The discovery felt like another painful loss because Richard had been part of our lives for as long as I could remember, celebrating birthdays, attending family dinners, and standing beside Ethan through every major milestone of our marriage. As I stared at the documents spread across Victoria's conference table, I realized that this was no longer just a hidden fortune waiting to be claimed, because it had become a carefully planned secret involving someone I had trusted almost as deeply as I had trusted my own husband. Victoria advised me not to confront Richard because people who spend years hiding financial secrets rarely tell the truth when they realize they have been discovered, and every careless conversation could destroy valuable evidence before we understood the full picture. Instead, she continued gathering bank records, corporate filings, and archived legal documents until we could clearly see where the money had traveled and who had benefited from every transfer over the years. A month later, one forgotten contract changed everything when Daniel uncovered an agreement signed in the early 1990s between Ethan, Richard, and an international technology investment group that had quietly purchased a valuable software patent. According to the contract, Ethan had been entitled to a massive share of the payment, but another confidential agreement gave Richard temporary authority to manage the funds until several legal conditions were satisfied, creating the opportunity that eventually led 2 years of deception. As more evidence surfaced, I found a small journal hidden inside an old toolbox in our garage, and every handwritten page revealed thoughts Ethan had never found the courage to share with me while he was alive. He admitted that he had recently discovered irregularities in the investment records, suspected Richard had secretly diverted millions of dollars through companies under his control, and planned to expose everything after collecting enough evidence to recover what rightfully belonged to our family. Reading those pages broke my heart because Ethan confessed that he had stayed silent for far too long out of fear that exposing the fraud would place both of us in danger. After receiving several anonymous warnings over the years, he apologized for allowing me to endure decades of financial hardship while believing he was protecting me, promising that once the investigation was complete, we would finally enjoy the peaceful retirement we had always dreamed about together. The journal became the strongest piece of evidence in our case because it matched the financial records, legal contracts, and transaction history already collected by Victoria and Daniel, leaving little room for anyone to dismiss the truth as coincidence. With every document carefully organized and every timeline verified, my attorney filed a major civil lawsuit against Richard and his business associates, setting the stage for a courtroom battle that would determine whether justice could finally uncover the truth hidden for more than 30 years. The courtroom remained completely silent as Victoria presented years of financial records, banking correspondence, corporate ownership documents, and Ethan's handwritten journal, carefully connecting every piece of evidence into a story that no longer sounded like speculation but undeniable fact. Richard sat across the room pretending to remain calm, yet every answer he gave during questioning created another contradiction that strengthened our case and slowly erased the confident image he had tried so hard to maintain. Several former financial advisors and company employees eventually agreed to testify after receiving legal protection, and their statements revealed that Richard had secretly controlled the investments for decades while repeatedly misleading Ethan about the condition of the account. They explained that millions of dollars had been diverted through complicated business structures, allowing Richard to enjoy a luxurious lifestyle while Ethan and I struggled to pay our mortgage, medical bills, and everyday living expenses without ever knowing the truth. After weeks of testimony and countless hours of reviewing evidence, the judge ruled that Richard had violated his legal responsibilities, committed financial fraud, and unlawfully concealed assets that should have remained protected for their rightful owner. The court ordered the recovery of the remaining fortune, froze Richard's companies, and awarded me the assets that Ethan had spent years trying to protect before his life ended unexpectedly, bringing a sense of justice I feared I would never experience, although no amount of money could return the husband I loved or erase the difficult years we endured together. The truth finally lifted the heavy burden that had followed me since the day of his funeral. I used part of the recovered fortune to establish scholarships for hardworking students, support hospitals that cared for families in need, and create charitable programs that reflected the kindness Ethan had always shown, choosing to transform years of pain into opportunities that would improve countless lives. As I look back on everything that happened, I have learned that hidden secrets eventually find their way into the light, and that courage, patience, and determination can uncover even the deepest deception when hope refuses to disappear. Please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.